Most people think they already know the answer. A NASCAR race car. How much can it really cost? You picture something fast, loud, wrapped in sponsor decals. You assume someone looked it up. You've probably heard a number, maybe two. But here's the problem with every number you've heard. Each one is real, and each one tells a completely different story. The question isn't wrong. The answer is just hiding inside a system most people have never seen. So let's start at the beginning, with the car itself. When NASCAR introduced the Next Gen car, the pitch was clear. A standardized, more affordable machine. One that would level the playing field and reduce the financial pressure choking smaller teams. NASCAR spent roughly $14 million developing it. The team spent nothing on development costs. On paper, it sounded like a reset. Denny Hamlin heard the early numbers. He was hopeful. At the time, the projected cost per car came in around $225,000. That was below what teams had been expecting. Below what NASCAR had been targeting. That number felt like progress. But Hamlin isn't just a driver. He's a co-owner of 23XI Racing, and owners see things differently than drivers do, because the $225,000 didn't hold. By the time teams were actually building and racing these cars, Hamlin put the real all-in figure at closer to $350,000. His words, rough estimate, but closer to accurate than not. "We're racing Lambos out there," he said. That phrase landed. Because what Hamlin was describing wasn't just a price increase. He was describing a shift in what kind of object a NASCAR car actually is. Not a machine, a financial asset, one that burns money every single weekend. But here's what most people still get wrong at this point. They hear $350,000 and think that's the answer. It isn't. That number describes one build, one car, ready to roll with a driver in it once. It does not describe what happens the moment that car leaves pit road. Let's separate three things that fans constantly confuse. First, a collector car. Something retired, auctioned, displayed. A piece of history. That is not what we're talking about. Second, a grassroots or late model stock car. Real racing, real cost, real skill. But an entirely different financial universe from Cup level. Third, a competitive, active, race-legal NASCAR Cup Series car. That is the object this story's about. The difference between these three categories isn't a matter of degree. It's a matter of system. Because the Cup car doesn't just cost money to build. It costs money to exist. Every week, whether it finishes the race or not. So where does the money actually go? Start with the chassis. The structural core of the car. One chassis can run between $70,000 and $120,000, depending on spec and sourcing. That's the skeleton. It says nothing yet about what goes on it, in it, or around it. Next comes the engine, and this is where the number starts to feel different. Cup teams don't typically buy engines outright. They lease them. Engine lease agreements run roughly $800,000 for a full season, per car. That's just the engine program. Before tires, before bodywork, before anything else. Goodyear supplies the tires exclusively. Teams spend around $20,000 per race weekend on rubber alone. Over a full 38-race Cup season, that adds up to roughly $780,000 in tires. For one car. Every set is used once and discarded. That's the rule. That's the cost. Now add the body panels, the aerodynamic pieces, the splitter, the diffuser, the roof panels, the quarter panels. Every crash takes some of these, sometimes all of them. And in NASCAR, crashes are not rare events. They are part of the racing calendar. When a car hits the wall at Talladega or gets collected in a multi-car wreck at Daytona, you are not looking at a setback. You are looking at a repair bill that can approach six figures in a single afternoon. Some teams have lost 2 or 3 cars worth of body components in a single race. That is why teams don't prep one car per race. They maintain rolling inventory, multiple chassis, hundreds of individual components organized, cataloged, and staged before every event weekend. The pit crew is its own budget line. Over-the-wall crew members are contracted through specialist development firms. That program costs roughly $260,000 per season, including travel. The crew chief, engineers, mechanics, fabricators, and analysts sitting behind the pit wall represent hundreds of thousands more in annual compensation. Transport is another layer most fans never think about. The haulers that carry each team's cars and equipment from track to track are not cheap to run. fuel, maintenance, drivers, scheduling. Each hauler represents significant weekly overhead. Then there is the shop itself, the facility where cars are built, torn down, rebuilt, analyzed, and prepared. For a competitive cup operation, that infrastructure is not small. This is the point where the number stops being about the car and starts being about the machine behind the car. The annual operating cost to field one competitive Cup Series car, and this is the number that changes the whole conversation, runs somewhere between $15 million and $20 million per season. Not per team, per car. Teams running multiple cars are multiplying that figure. A two-car operation is not twice as expensive as a one-car team, but it is not far from it either. For context, court filings from the 23 XV Racing and Front Row Motorsports lawsuit against NASCAR, one of the most significant legal battles in the sport's recent history, revealed that 23 XY's annual car costs alone range between $3.1 million and $4.3 million per year during the Next Gen era. Front Row Motorsports saw its per-car costs rise from $2.9 million in 2021 to $7.1 million by 2024. That is the Next Gen car. The one that was supposed to cost less. Those figures cover the car costs specifically. They do not cover personnel, transport, facilities, or the dozens of other operational costs layered on top. When the full picture is assembled, car costs, engine leases, tires, labor, logistics, facilities, the total annual operating cost for a competitive single-car cup program can exceed $18 million to $20 million. And that is before you account for what happens when your season doesn't go to plan. A crash in a playoff race, a mechanical failure that wipes out a points run, a sponsor who pulls funding mid-season. Each of these events doesn't just cost money, they cost position. And in NASCAR, position is money. Here is where the charter system matters. NASCAR's charter agreement guarantees chartered teams a base payout of $141,000 per event. When points-based performance bonuses are factored in, that rises to roughly $185,000 per event on average. Over a 38-race season, a chartered team can earn somewhere between $7 million and $18 million from NASCAR directly, depending on performance. But chartered teams are still reporting losses averaging $2.2 million per car after all costs are included. That number came from NASCAR's own financial disclosures during the charter dispute, earning $12 million from the sanctioning body and still losing money. That is the economics of NASCAR competition at the Cup level. The pressure that creates on owners is constant. Sponsorship is not supplemental income in NASCAR, it is survival income. A full primary sponsorship for a competitive Cup team runs roughly $400,000 per race week for top-level placement. That means a team's entire financial model depends on keeping corporate partners happy, visible, and engaged. Race after race, season after season, through crashes, bad finishes, and driver changes. This is what separates NASCAR's cost structure from almost every other major American sport. In the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, the product on the field is the players. The infrastructure is enormous but relatively fixed. You build the roster, you play the games. In NASCAR, the product is a machine that ages, crashes, wears out, and requires constant financial input just to maintain its competitive standing. Every lap at Daytona, every restart at Bristol, every pit stop at Martinsville, each one is a micro expense inside a season-long financial commitment that most sponsors and fans never fully understand. And here is what makes the car itself almost beside the point. You could buy a $350,000 fully built next-gen car tomorrow. You could have it transported to a NASCAR track. You could put a driver in it. And you would not be competitive, not even close. Because the car is not what makes the car fast. The system around it is. The engineers running data analysis between practices. The engine builder who has spent years dialing in horsepower curves for specific track configurations. The fabricators who know exactly where the weight distribution needs to be for a 1.5-mile oval versus a short track. That knowledge is not purchased with the car. It is built over years. It is retained through payroll. It is one of the most expensive invisible assets in American sport. The teams that win consistently, Hendrick Motorsports, Joe Gibbs Racing, Team Penske, are not winning because they bought better cars. They are winning because they have built deeper systems. Systems that cost more. Systems that perform more. systems that compound their advantages over time. And smaller teams know this. They feel it every week. When a mid-level team shows up at a super speedway, they are not just competing against the cars on track. They are competing against the organizational depth, financial reserves, and accumulated engineering knowledge of operations that spend 2, 3, sometimes 4 times more per season. That is the hidden architecture of NASCAR competition, and it is why the question, how much does a NASCAR car cost, is both easy and impossible to answer honestly at the same time. Because the honest answer is, it depends on what you mean by cost. If you mean the car sitting in the garage before Sunday's race, somewhere between $350,000 and $500,000 all in, depending on how the components are counted. If you mean what it takes to keep that car on track for a full season, closer to $3 million to $7 million in direct car costs alone. If you mean what it actually costs to run one car competitively at the cup level for a year, including every person, every system, every flight, every hauler, every strategy session, $15 million to $20 million minimum. 3 numbers, 3 different questions. 3 different realities hiding inside the same machine. And here's the final thing most people never consider. NASCAR built the Next Gen car to reduce costs. That was the stated goal. Standardized parts, a single chassis supplier, a design meant to bring the spending down and the competition up. But the costs didn't come down. They shifted. Teams now spend on different things. Simulation technology, data analytics, aero mapping. The arms race didn't end when the car was standardized. It just moved to the places the standardization didn't reach, which is precisely how competition in high-level sport always works. You close one gap and the teams with resources find the next one. Because in a sport where the margin between winning and losing is measured in hundredths of a second, no team with money is going to leave a legal advantage unpursued. That is not a flaw in the system. That is the system. So the next time someone tells you a NASCAR car costs $350,000, you can tell them they're right. And you can tell them they've missed almost everything. Because the car is just the beginning. Behind every machine that rolls onto pit road on a Sunday afternoon sits months of preparation, millions of dollars in infrastructure, and a financial commitment that never really ends. The car crosses the finish line. The bills don't. In NASCAR, speed has always been for sale. The question is never whether you can afford to buy it. The question is whether you can afford to keep buying it, week after week, season after season, until the money runs out. Or the sponsorship does. Or the system breaks you before the wall does. That is the real cost of a NASCAR car. Not the price of one machine, the price of staying in the race.